Aesthetics Corp. This is Made in House. It's the show where we chat through various topics on design, culture, and the business of creativity. Now say hello and welcome Kary and Angel.
Manu, welcome
Kary.
to the show. Everybody, we have Manu today on the show. Manouchka Charles.
Yes.
If you're not familiar with Manu, she's going to do a quick little intro for us. But by the end of this episode, you're going to get to know her more. And you should follow and just
Come
be
on the
in the
journey.
know with Manu because she's a great person to know and to
thank
follow.
you. You're a great person
and
to
do
know
life
and to
with.
follow.
Thanks for being on the show today. And today we're going to just have a conversation around life. I want to talk about not quitting, staying grounded, playing the long game.
Yeah.
And I think Manu has been somebody who I've seen her life trajectory for the last few years has done this well, I think. And we've been talking a little bit about just the stuff that she's doing now, and she'll share that with you guys. And it's kind of the fruit of the last few years, your whole life, basically. But the last few years, and I think it's really beautiful to see. And I just wanted to bring her on and have a conversation because I think it'll encourage all of us. You know, life is made up of highs and lows.
Right.
And they both matter. And how you approach both and what you do with both determines a lot of like your pace and where you end up. And
Right.
And I think you have a lot of wisdom in that. So I want to talk to you about it. But before we get into all of that, where are you from? Tell us.
I'll tell the people I am from Brooklyn, New York, the best
Very
place
proud,
on
very
earth. If you're
proud.
from Brooklyn, you already know we carry a great pride from being from Brooklyn. But I wanted to say something before I get into kind of
Tell
who
me.
I am. One, thank you for allowing me to be on the show, the pod, whatever people call it these days.
Yeah.
But what's really cool, I'm thinking about the first time that we ever met would have probably been 5 years ago, back in 2018. I had heard your name and I maybe saw your name on a Basecamp message, but never, Basecamp is a project management tool that you guys probably know about, who knows. But I hadn't met you personally, but I hadn't gotten into a car accident that year. And you had like sent me a DM that you just wanted to come to my house and like, you know, spend some time with me. And I usually don't let people I don't know come to my house and hang with me. But everybody raved about how amazing you were. And I'm like, I love that this couple just wants to come and spend some time with me. And that was our first interaction of you not even knowing me really and just wanting to come and be with me. And that always like stuck out to me that you guys were just people who were like, you know what? She's going through a tough season. We may not all the way know her, but we want to meet her. And throughout these past 5 years, we've been able to work closely together and do a whole lot of life together. So I just want to let you know I'm grateful for you, grateful to be a part of this today. And
Love
so,
you, Nunu, of course. We couldn't have missed that. That was a big deal in your life.
That was
and
a
we
big
can
deal.
talk a little bit more
Yeah,
about
we
that.
definitely
but
can.
That was something, and it's funny because I was fairly new to VOUS at that point. I don't even think I was on staff yet.
No, you weren't.
And Manu got in a really bad accident in Mexico. And it really, I think the entire community, it hit the entire community.
Right.
I don't know why I did it. Because you're right. And now, I don't think I would DM somebody and be like, hey, let me go to
Can
your
I come
house.
over? Like, who are you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
But
I'm so glad that you did though.
yeah, and you were very generous and you let us come and we got to see you. You were in recovery,
Yep.
you know, and yeah, that kind of set the course for the beginning.
Definitely. I know that really stood out to me. That was like a marker of like, oh, I could just tell the kind of people they are because of that. And so
Love you, boo.
I love
All
you.
right, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, New York.
Tell me about Brooklyn because I've actually never been.
That is the
It's
saddest
sad.
thing
Isn't it
I've
sad?
heard.
been to New York twice in my life.
Wow, you just skipped over Brooklyn.
I did, yeah.
You know what? I won't even be mad about that. Next time you'll come with me. But growing up in Brooklyn, it's one of those things where no matter where you go, I feel like no matter where I go, if I say Brooklyn, people like, I don't know, it's just like one of those, you get street cred or something
yeah.
for being from Brooklyn. But I think that if you look at Brooklyn now and the Brooklyn that I grew up in, it for sure shaped who I am. It has shaped me as a person. I think being able to grow up in a place that was diverse on so many levels. I mean, it was diverse in how much money people made. It was diverse culturally. It was diverse in all sorts of ways that you start to pull from all of these different cultures. You start to pull from all of these different experiences, who you went to school with. I mean, my high school had 4,000 people in it. Wow. And so it was no small place. So you really had to learn how to navigate in a big city at a very young age. You're grabbing the subway alone at, when you're in the 6th grade. So imagine like a 12-year-old hopping on the train, going to school and traveling, like all of that kind of stuff shapes who you are and it defines you. And so I think that's why people from Brooklyn carry so much pride, because Brooklyn has so much character, has so much history. I mean, the music that has come out of Brooklyn, the fashion that has come out of Brooklyn, there's so much attached to it. And so I think we do hold being from New York near and dear. So no matter how long you've been out of New York, you still claim it. It's about to be 10 years that I moved to Miami, which is crazy to think. January will make it 10 years, but I'm from Brooklyn. I live in Florida and I love it. Florida is my home, or Miami to be more specific. Florida is a very big place. Yeah, you got to specify. But I love living in Miami, but I'm a Brooklyn girl through and through.
I love that. I got to go. I think there's a really great art scene too, I think, in Brooklyn.
Yes.
And we went last January. We got stuck in some storm, so we didn't really go seeing a lot. We kind of stayed in the Manhattan's, what you call it?
Yep, Manhattan.
Sorry, I'm
the
not
city,
very well.
it's okay. There's 5 boroughs for people who need to know. There's Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, Staten Island, and the Bronx.
Oh, shoot.
So these are 5 boroughs of New York City. Obviously, there's things outside of New York City, upstate, all that stuff. But the 5 boroughs would be considered this New York City. It's the boroughs.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for teaching me.
I'm
all right,
here to help.
So you what made you come to Miami?
So I moved to Miami. I was at a point in life, I call it my quarter life crisis. And I would say that I had it early, because I had my quarter life crisis at 22 versus 25. They say that your quarter life crisis is that time in life. It's like that transition. You're no longer in high school. You're no longer in college. You're no longer having to you have these things that are set up for you to succeed and to get to the next place. But then you find yourself all right, I did all the things. Graduate high school, get into a good college, get a good job. And then you're finally okay, what are my goals? My goals have been set for me my whole entire life. Get to this place, get to that next place. And so I found myself where I'm like, okay, what are the goals? What's next for me? And so I was just kind of thinking through what I wanted to do. And one of the biggest things that had always stuck out to me is I want to do something that matters. I want to do something of purpose. And so those were the main words that were always going through my mind. It was purpose and do something that matters. And so at the time I had heard Pastor Rich preach. So in that season of my quarter life crisis, I heard Pastor Rich preach at a church. I'd never heard him preach before. And I was like, oh man, that's cool. That's such a good sermon. And Twitter was hot then. It's X now, I guess. I don't even use it anymore, but it is transitioned. But he had posted something that said, come spend the year in Miami. And it was talking about an internship at Trinity Church. So VOUS didn't even exist at the time. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? Let me do it. Let me spend a year in Miami. It's a 2.5-hour flight. I could do a year, figure out for me, I was just trying to find purpose. I didn't know what purpose looked like. I didn't know what my purpose was necessarily. I was just looking for it. And so moving to Miami was just an avenue for me to figure out, okay, what am I going to do that matters in life? And so I got here and just started to discover in different ways and saw how God connected me to my purpose. And it didn't happen right away. I didn't move here and was like, I've got my purpose. It took some time, but that's how I got here originally. And I planned to do a year and just never left.
Dude, so you saw one sermon from Pastor Rich.
One.
And just trusted the guy to go and do it.
I will say I saw one sermon, but then I started I was following him on Twitter. So I would see different things that he posed. You know what I mean? Instagram was kind of a thing, but it wasn't, you didn't have stories. Yeah. You couldn't really really see what was happening in people's lives. But at the time I hadn't visited the church. I mean, I definitely kind of moved in blind. It wasn't now. If you're a part of our program, we have preview days and you can come visit. Yeah. You could check things out. There was none of that. It was all right, I'm coming, you know? And so that I really did go. It was a faith move for sure. It was not like I had all the details, no, it was
how did you identify that was your step? Because I think some of the things that I want to teach through this podcast
Right.
is identifying those little things that kind of lead you into your next move,
Right.
because life is like a guessing game sometimes.
Totally.
And sometimes you don't have a full picture. You're
Right.
kind of just going by a nudge.
Right. And I think that's the word that I was going to say. Because for me, and people can identify where they need to go next differently. For me, Miami was a nudge, and it felt so strong. I don't think I've ever had something that I felt like I needed to do so clearly, like moving to Miami. Wow. I remember when I saw the website, I literally called my dad and I was like, I'm moving to Miami. It was like May and I think August was when it was getting ready. So I was like, I'm moving in 2 months. And he's like, no, you're not. Wow. He's like, no, chill out. Let's take some time to talk about this and think about it. And if you really want to go, you'll go in January, which was a really smart move. But like, I just had this overwhelming sense of like, I need to go to Miami. I didn't have the words or the language. It's not like God gave me, a vision. No one gave me a prophetic word and was like, God's gonna move you to Miami and he's gonna do this. It was none of that. Really, in that season, I just felt like a tug that I needed to go, and I felt a peace about it. And I think when it comes to decision making and where to go next, if you really tune your ear, you'll hear it. But what I've learned is that I hear God in different ways in different seasons. And so it's not always like 10 years ago when I heard move to Miami. And it wasn't audible. It was just a feeling and a sensing that I couldn't shake. Yeah. And so I think I have been okay with making decisions, not always relying on the way that I made a decision the time before, if that makes sense. So it's like, it's not always going to come to me the same way, but I am like a feeler. Yeah. And so like, there's certain things where I'm just like, no, I don't need to go there. Or no, I don't need to do that. And it's because I have a peace about going or a peace about not going.
Yeah.
I'll tell this one quick story. When I was like a year into Miami, and I was like, okay, now I need a job, because before I came here just to do school and just to do the internship, and I knew that I needed a job, and I was on my way to a job interview, and I just felt, nope, turn around. It was crazy.
Wow.
I turned around and came back home. My friend was like, how'd the interview go? I was like, I didn't go. It's like, but you need a job and you don't have any money.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I didn't feel it. Like, there was no sense of urgency. There was no sense of like, you need to go to this thing. And then a month later, I found the job that I actually needed to have when I first moved here. But it was just something that I really can't describe. But it was like, no, I don't need to do this. Yeah. I don't need to go here. I'm good. And so it happens in different ways, but I think for me, I'm trying to make sure that I'm tuning my ears so that I can hear God on like, all right, where to go, what to do. Yeah. I always get it right, but I always say God's the God of the redirect. Mm-hmm. Even if I like find myself in a place that I'm not supposed to be, if I'm really trying to seek out His will and the way that I should be doing something, He'll redirect me where I need to go.
For sure, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, because I think people, young people, even us, we're still making decisions.
I'm still young, so I just want to, I don't know who you're referencing when you say young people.
The young folk, I know, right? Somebody made fun of me because I'm like, okay, you young creatives, right. And I'm like, you're 33, like chill out, But I'm really referencing people that they're in that season where they leave high school and they're trying to figure out, because you're kind of expected to have a lot figured out by the time you're out of high school, and so just how to make certain decisions and how to move towards the things that you're supposed to be doing. And I think the key is we never have a full picture. We never have the answer. Like you're saying, it's a feeling. And I think there's also, if you miss it, it's okay. Because I think there's also a redirection, because whether you're a full believer or not, there's feelings in you. 100%. There's always a tug and a pull towards certain things, and just paying attention to what that is. And
to that, the other thing that I want to add is also having voices around you, like my dad being like, oh, not yet. Yeah. Timing is everything. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't need to move in August. I needed to move in January. I think it was very strategic, because that is the year that at the end of the year is when we announced that we were going to start VOUS Church. Had I started the program in August and went August to August, I would have missed it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like had it went the way that, and I've actually never thought about that till just now in this moment as I'm saying it. It's like, I could have started in August, ended in August, would have pieced out. And I think they announced VOUS Church maybe towards the end of like Q3 or like probably September during like a vision night or something like that. And so timing is everything. Wow. And I think God will use different things in order for you to get to the place that you need to go. But but bringing what you feel to wise counsel. So I didn't make that decision in isolation. I didn't be like, yo, I'm moving to Miami. No, like I was like, I want to move to Miami, and I brought it to my parents. I brought it to my siblings. I brought it to my close friends, and I was like, all right, cool. This is what I'm thinking about doing. And I got to get them to weigh in on it. And really it was more of all right, cool from everything. I talked to my pastors back home. They was like, all right, great. It was so funny. Another sidebar story. My pastor, I grew up in a Haitian church in Brooklyn, and there was like part of the form, your pastor had to fill it out and like had to like write a recommendation. And my pastor in his recommendation was like, Manouchka's great, but she doesn't go to Sunday school. Sunday school was a big deal at our church, but I was like, listen, church is already 6 hours long. I'm not coming earlier and then having to sit through this service. But it was hilarious.
Gosh,
he was like,
funny.
Sunday school attendance, not good.
That's so funny. That's crazy. But something that you say, because you mentioned that you just realized that right now.
Right.
Another helpful too is like reflecting, right? So like, I think we're in the year now where like we've done a few good big decisions,
Right.
And I think that what's helpful is like when you reflect and you kind of put the cards, you kind of start seeing patterns.
Right.
And like now you're identifying, I sought counsel from certain people,
Right.
you know, I went to my pastor. Like there was a certain process that you undertook in order to make that decision. You didn't do it in isolation.
Right.
And I think I'm sure now if you know, when you start preaching, because we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure you went through a similar process, you
Right.
know, because you're still under leadership and you're being sent out from a house or a
Right.
church, you know, VOUS Church. But that's another key that's helpful, reflection. Okay, so you're in Miami
Yep.
and you launched VOUS Church. That's long. What is it that you call the angel? TLDR? Do you know that?
Too long,
There you
didn't
go.
read, because that's always me. My brother will send me an article. I'm like, oh, you want me to read this? Please give me the cliff
Yeah,
notes.
I didn't know what that was. I'm so out of. It's really sad. I've somehow I have lost.
Get a TikTok.
I
just
do,
got one, and so now I'm in the loop.
but somehow I ended up in a creative loop.
Okay.
So I need to get, like, I saw Mika yesterday dancing. I'm like, what are these kids dancing?
They're getting
to?
sturdy.
Oh, how do you, Manu? How?
Also, Brooklyn is, I feel like, a hub for all of these trends, and so people will look at things like, oh, that's so like Gen Z. I'm like, nah, that's Brooklyn. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's
My
called-
nieces and nephew get sturdy, and they're like 4.
But
Like I
that's
like
so
all
like
that
that
stuff.
dance, whatever. That
Yeah.
means getting sturdy. Okay.
Yeah. I assume that I haven't seen the video of Mika, but I assume she's probably
Yeah, I saw some
getting
other people
sturdy.
that,
Like at VOUS High, and they were
Yeah,
like
VOUS.
doing all the things. Yeah.
all right. I learned my Gen Z words from Manu.
Yes, that's what I'm
In
here for. Honestly, I just
conversations.
hang out with 19-year-olds to stay young.
Okay, so you end up at VOUS, you do the internship, they launch VOUS Church.
Yes.
And do you get on staff right away?
No. I start working as a personal assistant. And so when I decided to move to Miami, I didn't have a car. I really had no money either. And I was like, okay, I need a job. I need to figure this out. And so I got my first car. And started job hunting, started working as a personal assistant throughout the first year. So I was part of our launch team. We would have these meetings, we would prep, and we'd talk about church. And so throughout that whole time, I had another job. So probably the first 2 years of VOUS, I was a year and a half or so, I was working as a personal assistant.
Did you have a moment where you were like, I'm going to be part of this for the long haul?
Yes. I think at first I was like, I don't know anything about church planting. And so I was just like kind of just in the room, just like a fly in the wall. I'm like, all right, I'm happy to be here. Don't know what I'm doing. But I think as we kind of progressed and got more responsibility and started talking about vision, seeing people come in, I was like, okay, God's really building something here. And it's unlike anything that I've ever been a part of. And this is where I need to be, because there's like, it's not, I'm not looking for any other options. This is it. I do feel like there's something happening here. And so, I think there was a moment of realization. I kind of went from, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to stay here, to, okay, I think I'm getting a picture of why I'm here and what I could even bring to the table.
And you've been on staff now, what, 6, 7 years?
It's going to be 7 years in January.
Let's go, man.
Yeah.
That deserves a clap. 7. We're really into the symbolism.
So
seven.
yeah, that is a great year,
Yeah.
I believe.
Okay, so I've seen you. I got on staff on 2018. You got
Right.
on staff when?
It would have been 20. I'm really bad. You got on staff on 2018. Are you sure?
Yeah, May 2018.
Right. Okay, so then maybe I got on staff January 2017. Somebody do the math. January 2017 to January 2024. Is that going to be 7 years?
18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I'm really bad at math, and so I didn't want to embarrass myself here. So January 2017
There you go.
is when I got on staff, and we would have launched the church September 2015.
Yeah. Okay. So when I got there, I think you were leading I Love My City. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because I've seen you, I've worked closely with you at VOUS, and I've seen you take on different roles.
Right.
And you're always up for it. I'm a little different. I'm like, creative, this is where I'm at.
Right.
Just keep me.
I just don't. If I had just like, if I was just as gifted as you, people would only ask me to do one thing. But it's,
I think the reason you get moved around a lot is because you're a great builder.
you know what's funny? It's like I get moved around, but it's all this. I've been doing the same thing since I started. It might have
always-
shaped into different things, but it's literally have been the same thing for 7
Which
years. I
is-
feel like, which is kind of fun.
Building teams, growing
Right.
the ministry.
Right.
Okay, so you've been I Love My City, and I think Crew, Boot Care,
Yep.
and what do you do
All
now?
the things that you say. Location pastor
There you
role, right?
Yeah, you oversee our city location.
Yes.
Okay, so I mentioned that because she's been in the same place, doing similar things but different.
Yeah.
Being asked to move around. So I'm sure you've gotten used to doing something for X amount of time.
Right.
And then you're like plugged out. Oh, now I'm gonna get moved.
Right.
But in all of that, I've always seen you have a really positive attitude about it. I'm sure you're human, right? So we all have
Yes.
our moments, but I've always
Totally.
seen you have a really positive attitude about it, and you've always been very flexible. I've never seen you be like, I'm done, this is not going the way that I wanted it to go, I'm peace out. I think you have a clear vision of you're supposed to be in the room regardless
Right.
of which room,
Right.
and you've just been up for the road, and I think God has blessed that.
Thank you.
I'm using faith terms, but basically she's seeing the fruit
Right.
of her labor now, because now you're in a position where you've gained a platform that we talked offline about. This was a dream of yours
Right.
5 years ago, but you're just serving at a church,
Right.
local Miami, and the last few years, you're just now you're getting called to preach. So every weekend you're out preaching somewhere, But beyond that, you have a lot of people around you that look up to you, that you've led over the years, and that trust you to lead them.
Right.
And I think
Wow.
that is all fruit, literally,
That's beautiful.
of you just being in the same place, doing
Yeah.
the same thing for now almost 7 years.
Right.
So that's the conversation that I really want to have.
Yeah. I think what is so beautiful is that over time, things have just evolved. So the way that I look at it is when I first got on staff, it was like next steps and I Love My City.
Oh
And
my gosh, yes, I remember the growth track.
growth
And-
track, all that fun stuff. The first team that I served on was growth track.
Yeah.
And so essentially that's a class or a course that kind of walks people through discipleship and getting them on team. But really the thing that I've been doing 7 years ago is the thing that I'm doing now. It just has evolved into different things. You know what I mean? Like I think a few more things have been added on and I get to see it from a different vantage point, but it's really have been building the church, building disciples, building people, loving people. And I think when I came to a realization that what I do has an effect on how people walk out their spiritual journey, I think there's a weight of responsibility that comes to it. I was talking to some people on our team and I was like, as we prepare and as we get ready for certain things, it's like we have this responsibility. God is using us in this season to help people on their journey. And so this is not something that we can take lightly. This is not something that we could just like, all right, I'm just going to come up with an idea and just pull it out of a hat. It's like, no, I want to pray and I want to seek God. All right. How do I help people to grow? How do I help people to get better? How do I help people to find their purpose? Because that was the biggest thing for me when I was 22, 23 years old, was purpose. God, I want to have purpose. God, I want to do something that matters. I don't want to just do something that makes my name great. I don't want to just do something that blesses me, but I want to be able to do something that blesses the kingdom, something that I can say, you know what? This is bigger than me. It's not about me, but there's purpose attached to it. And so I've been able to remain planted in certain places because there's the vision of why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's like when you go back to the why. All right, why do I do what I do? Okay, because there's people attached to it. People who were once like me, trying to figure out purpose, that now get to attach to a purpose, and they get to attach to this body. And I think being a part of a community helps give people purpose. Yes. I'm an individual, but I'm part of a collective, and the collective, just like being from Brooklyn, it's like I get around people from Brooklyn. It's like, all right, we have this collective thing, is this thing amongst us because we're from the same place. We have the same culture. We speak the same language. We're saying the same things. And so there's a beauty in being a part of a collective because it gives me a purpose, but then having my own individual things that I do. Yeah. I think it helps to realize that I'm not just in the crowd, because sometimes people get lost in a crowd, but I'm like, no, I'm still an individual. God still loves me individually, but he's allowed me to be a part of a community because it helps me flourish and grow in different parts of my life.
Yes, I love that. So something that you mentioned that I really love is that you've been doing the same thing, but it's evolved. Right. And I actually think that's key. And it's actually, even now thinking about it, it's helping me just gain perspective on monotony and routine and kind of doing the same thing over and over. That when you do things over and over, there's an evolution attached to it. I never thought about that till right now, but that's kind of like a guarantee, right? Like if you like work out the same muscle, like the muscle's gonna grow. You know what I mean?
So they say. I don't know from experience.
I don't know either. But that's
I've been told.
That's what science says. But I love that. And is that like the perspective that you've kind of held on to do the same thing for so long?
Yeah. And I think not automatically. I think the revelation has come over time. The more that people will ask, oh, what do you do? And kind of like will ask questions like that. I've just realized, because there's certain things where in certain seasons where I was doing something and then somebody else started doing it and then somehow I'm doing it again. And so things have shifted, and I've just noticed that I'm like, yeah, I've kind of been rocking with the same things since 2017 or 2015. They just look differently. It's like, all right, I could be leading a location, but growth track still matters. I'm still asking some of the same questions that I probably did. There's probably people that are doing the thing that I was actually doing, but now I get to see it from a different vantage point. And so I think there is something to be said about that evolution. There's a verse in I'm not gonna say where it is, because then somebody's like, you don't know your Bible. But I'm gonna say 1 Samuel or 1 Kings. Anyways, cut this out the podcast. But what I will say, there's a story about David, and it talks about him going back and forth from the palace to the pasture. Essentially, King Saul asked him to come play and be a musician in the palace, but he's still having to feed sheep in the pasture. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, David, he went back and forth. He had to learn how to live in the pasture, take care of the pasture, but then also be in the palace. And I think, and it's not like I'm going to just work in the pasture just so I can get to the palace. Because sometimes you're going to be in the pasture for forever, and that's your calling. And we have to resolve that in our heart and be content. But the fact that he was able to be in this grand place and be in the palace, but still not forsake the sheep. I think that's just so key of like, okay, how can I do the same thing in different ways? How can I continue to stay committed to the thing that I'm responsible for? And it doesn't matter if I have a glimpse of something else. Even though I have a glimpse of something else, I can still honor what I do. And so it could seem like, oh man, you've been doing the same thing for 7 years, or you've been doing a lot of the same things, even though it's evolved. How do you stick with it? I think just understanding, if I understand the responsibility, like these sheep need to get fed, right? I got to take care of this. So I don't want to neglect the thing that I have to take care of just to be in another space.
I love that. And I think that's something, we were talking about this offline as well. It's like, that gets lost in real life. You know what I mean? Because
Totally.
you're always like the phrase, the grass is greener on the other side, right?
Right.
There's always, whatever it is that you're doing is never as attractive as the thing
Totally.
that you see. I was talking actually, K-Hub, she was working with Mav, and I opened my Spotify and the ad came up with her artwork. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I took a screenshot, I sent it to her, and she's like, how funny, like, it's never that exciting when it's your own work, you know?
That's crazy.
And I'm like, literally, it doesn't matter how big the project or how much money you get paid for it. There's something about the desire versus I already did it, that it feels different.
Right.
And it's not as gratifying, and it's sad because it's like once you got the thing, it's like, oh, okay, oh, that's all.
Yeah.
That's
because your contentment was never in it. If you put your contentment in the thing, I've been saying this. I was like, it's funny how contentment is never in the now season. It's always next. I'll be content when I get married. I'll be content when I have the kid. I'll be content when I get this opportunity. We're always looking for contentment in the next season. And if we're always looking for it in the next season, when we get to that season, guess what we want? The next season. And so it's me understanding that I can be content right where I am, because my contentment actually is not from some external source. It's really not from what I do. It's not from how much money I make. It's not from notoriety, but my contentment comes from something internal. And so when you root and ground yourself in something internal, which is God, for me and for you, when you root yourself in something like that, it's like, no, I'm content because I was like, I got God, and no matter how many titles that I could have or could hold, and no matter how many positions, my favorite position and my favorite title that I've been really praying and seeking God, I was like, my favorite title is now daughter. It's like, I have a lot of job titles. I've had a lot of job titles. I went to preach somewhere and it was like, Dr. Manouchka Charles. And I was like, I'm not a doctor. I was like, you gave me a new title. I was like, that's not even my title. But like, out of all the different titles that I have, I'm like, the title that I want to be most grateful for is just being a daughter, because that's not a title that I have to work for. That's not a title that I have to prove myself for. You can't get promoted to a daughter. You don't have to work to be a daughter. If I could rest in that, if I'm like, oh, I'm content in the position of being a daughter, everything else is a bonus. Yeah. Everything else I get to do, oh, praise God. I'm enamored, and I'm so grateful, because I'm like, oh, wow, I already got everything that I need, but God has given me this bonus of this and given me that. And so I can learn how to be content when I remove my contentment from my success, or if I fail at something, and I can find it in who I am and my identity in Christ. And so I could change jobs, I could change roles, I could change positions, but it doesn't change that I'm a daughter. Like, nothing could ever change the fact that I'm a daughter.
I love that, Manu, because you're actually saying something that I think is really important. And I think in the creative field, we get caught up in the titles a lot. You know, I think it's like, I'm a freelancer.
Here's my work. This is
I'm
what I
an
do.
art director. Yeah, here's my portfolio. Oh, I worked for X brand or whatever. It's very much that kind of, I guess, race, you know, and like the your social proof, or like how good you are is attached to the bigger the name. Oh, dang, you must be doing real good, you know? And I think when I first started my journey, you know, I worked at VOUS, and I knew what I was getting into when I said, yeah, I'll do graphic design for a church, but not really, you know, until I started doing it. And the creative director role, I shared about this a little bit, but that is an appealing title to somebody who's in my field, you know. And when that opportunity came up, I was like, oh, I'll do it and I'll smash it. And little did I know what it actually meant, you know, like the people working, the stuff that actually wears you down, you know. And so it was like, at some point, that title was not enough to hold me through the season. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was like, oh, shoot, I can give this up real quick and I won't feel bad about it, because it's already in my resume, so I can move on to the next thing, you know? But it was that I really had to work through that and find a different title that had nothing to do with my performance or what I was doing. It was more of, I'm serving these people. I'm here to serve. And then that helped me through the highs and lows of when you become a creative director in an organization. I've talked to Pastor Rich about this. you don't do that much creative work. You're in a lot of meetings. You're in a lot of decision making. You become less of what the title actually is.
Right.
And I struggled a lot with that too,
Wow.
you know? So I love that you're bringing this up, that your title, the one that means the most to you and that keeps you the most grounded and just level headed and going
Yep.
is daughter. Because
Yep.
it's not attached to anything,
Right.
but just who you are.
Gotta be.
Yeah.
Like if I just gotta be, I'm chilling.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that. Trying to finish this conversation.
Oh, turned off?
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you now. We talked about, purpose, feeling, being a daughter, titles. So what's something how do you overcome distractions, or how do you, because again, you're human.
I'm distracted right now.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
So while my kid was crying in the background, how did you?
I was like, I can't take it. No, I'm kidding. How do I overcome distractions? Discipline. And I wouldn't say that I'm like great at this, because I'm like, Lord, help me to not be distracted, because there's so many distractions. And sometimes distractions could be good things of like, oh, this person wants me to come here with them or do this thing, but I know that I have a task. And so I think for me, the way that I have kind of fought to keep distractions out of my life. Social media is a big distraction. And so you already know, like, I be off and on all the
I'm
time.
like,
Like, I just like, are you on
get
Instagram
on.
today? I know exactly. I'm like, no, deleted the app. But like for me, it's been like restricting certain things of like, all right, whether I'm not going to be on social media for a certain period of time, or I have to say no to certain things that I want to go to because I know that I need to write, or I need to focus or get ready for something. And so for me, it's been to eliminate distractions. I just need to just like have guardrails and set restrictions in order for me to stay focused. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it's changing my environment. Say if I need to work on a sermon or write, like last night I was trying to write a sermon and I was all the way distracted. Like, and sometimes I'll tell myself that I'm doing research. I'm like, oh, no, you're on your phone for research. And then all of a sudden I'm in like some rabbit hole, YouTube videos. Like has nothing to do with what I even want to talk about. And so it's like sometimes changing my scenery, getting out the house, getting in different places. Last weekend, I took my first solo trip because I wanted to just like have a time of focus. I was like, all right, I just wanted to be me and God. I want to be able to write. I want to be able to pray. I want to eliminate the distractions. And so it was getting out of my environment and being in a different space so that I could focus. And so I think in different seasons, it's fighting in different ways. Sometimes it's me taking a prayer walk, or me like getting around nature and doing different things like that. And I think that sometimes helps to focus me and recenter me where I need to be.
Got it. So how do I phrase this? So I guess what you're doing is you're not necessarily searching. Like when you get distracted, you're not searching for anything else. Like for example, for me, I'll work on a project, right? And I'm really, this is dope. And I'll go on Instagram and I'll see, dang, I suck, So then I'm like, I forget about that. And then I start trying to do something else to get to the level of the thing that I saw that I'm like, I got to get to that.
Right.
And it distracts me. And then I'm like, no, but I'm becoming somebody. I'm not like, that's not who you know what I mean? I start, impersonating almost. But is that how you feel, or it's more just like you're wasting time and you need to be more productive? And
it's both, and I hear what you're saying, because like sometimes for me it's I'm wasting time. Like my time could be used for certain things, and then sometimes like I don't have to be so hard on myself, because everything doesn't always have to be, every hour doesn't have to be I gotta produce, I gotta do stuff. And so learning, okay, if I'm slating this time to actually get something done, let me get it done, versus other times, like there's times where I can't be on social media, times where I can be watching funny TikToks, or but every time is not slated for that. I don't know if I I do listen to other people, because like you're in the creative realm, so you might like look at other, I don't know what, designers and all of that stuff. But I do listen to other preachers for research sometimes to maybe if I want to like, all right, how do they transition here? How do they tell this story? But I've realize that I'm just different. Everybody's different. And so I don't try to be like another speaker necessarily, but I'll try to learn from other people. So I don't think that other people, I know there was this other day I heard somebody preaching. I'm like, dang, yo, what am I doing? I'm like, they really know how to preach. Pastor Richard preached, and he was preaching in that little prison cage, and it was like a master class of preaching. I was just like, this is mastery. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but with that's preaching.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily discourage me, because I also think, I'm like, he's been doing this for years. And so I can't compare myself to somebody who's been doing this for a really, really long time, and expect me to be that way. And so I don't really tend to fall that much on that spectrum of the comparison side of it. But there is, I think sometimes in different realms, I'm talking specifically in the preaching, I don't think I struggle with that a whole lot, because I'm like, all right, I know that I'm a sound different, I'm gonna be different. I kind of lean into that, but I still learn from other people, but I don't expect to be like them. But I think there's sometimes when it comes to where you should be in life, sometimes those kind of comparisons could be like, oh man, I don't have this yet, or I didn't do this yet. And it's like, all right, you feel like the timeline is coming for certain things. So that might be an area of struggle sometimes, but for the most part, I would say that my distractions can come from, I need to be working on this, but then I start working on something else. Or I start not even working on something else. I start just doing something else. Or if something gets hard, that's another thing that I've noticed. Like if something gets too difficult, I'll try to distract myself with something else. I'll be like, all right, this is too hard for me to do. Let me get on my phone, and now I'm transported into another thing, and I don't have to deal with the thing that I need to like handle.
I do that too. Yeah, I get like an anxiety about starting like a blank page,
right?
And then I end up like trying to resolve it through distractions. So,
right.
Well, I got a long way to go. I need to be in some of that freedom that you're experiencing.
We do different things, and I think because like preaching is so specific to the person. I think and I'm pretty sure there's lots of preachers that struggle with comparison, and I'm not saying that I'm not that I'm like this person that's in this bubble. I'm like I don't deal with comparison at all, but it's just not like, I don't think it's like the main struggle. But I can see how like a creative body of work, you can look at it and look at somebody else's creative body of work and compare the two, or how do they do this, or how do they do that. I think even speaking is so specific, because there's some people who hear me like, I don't really like that preacher. There's other people who hear me like, I really love that preacher. And the same goes with art too, but I feel like it's so unique to the person. Like there's lots of specific skill that comes with like, all right, how do I do the Photoshop thing? I'm gonna name things that I don't even know exist, right? Like you're like, no, nobody uses that anymore. But there's things that's like, I feel like on a skill level that there's like, oh, they do this like this, and they use this font and they use that. And I think because I think those are comparable things.
Yeah.
Might be maybe some of the differences.
Yeah.
But you're incredible at what you do.
Thank you. But I have my moments where I'm like, if I don't keep it like in check and have a discipline around it, how you were talking, it'll knock me out of my feet. And I'll just be like, what the frick am I doing? I'll think about like the timeline thing too. I'm like, oh, this person is on Forbes under 30. What am I doing?
They're 23 and they make $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely keeping those things in check. And I think you have your practice of getting in and out of Instagram is something that you do throughout the year. She'll be on, and you'll know when she's on, and you'll know when she's dropped off, you know? And I'm like, Manu, be consistent on Instagram.
Right. I don't know how to be. So.
Yeah. Well, because you have an influence that I just want people to see more of you, you know? And I think that whenever you get on Instagram, people react, you know? And it's like, I would like to see more of that. So that's why I'm always like, can you just like freaking post your Devo on Instagram?
I need to. Can somebody help me?
Honestly.
Who's going to help me do that?
Like you've done photo shoots and stuff. What's going on?
Yeah, I did one photo shoot one time with Yessie, and she doesn't even live here anymore. So shout out to Yessie.
Okay, I'm going to end the conversation with this last question. So there's conflict in obedience, right? Just because you're being obedient doesn't mean everything's happy-go-lucky.
Right.
So I'm sure in your 7 years, and even in now, your next 7 years, there's things that you have to do in obedience now to get to those 7 years. Have you ever experienced like a struggle where you're like, frick, like, God literally help me?
Yeah.
Like,
every day.
I don't feel it. This sucks. I want out, but you know you're not supposed to.
Right. I think the year that I got into my car accident was really difficult for me, to even transition back from like going through a really traumatic experience to going back to work to having to navigate through all those different things. And at some points in that year, I just felt like I couldn't do certain things. There were so many restrictions that I think the frustration sometimes comes from I can't produce what I used to produce, or I'm not where I used to be. Even I just feeling like, I think that year I was like, man, I felt that I was going into my second year of ministry at the time. And I was so excited in January because I was like, all right, I did one round of this and I know where I messed up and I know where I can get better. And so I was excited to like do it all over again. But then February of that year, I'm like hit with this blow. I get into this car accident, short story, got into a car accident, was in a coma for 10 days, out of work for months. And I felt delayed. And so like, I felt like I was trying to play catch up. And so when you can't do something, it's like frustrating. It's like, I can't do this, or I can't do this on the level that I would want to do it. And I think sometimes when we feel like we can't produce at the level that we want to, that it can paralyze us, and that we could feel like, man, I can't do this. If I can't do it the way that I want to do it, then I won't do it at all. And so I think that year was a challenging year for me to learn how to push past what I felt, and just going back to just like wise counsel, just being around people like, hey, this is really hard for me. I'm really struggling. And people saying, all right, it's not time to quit. It's not time to give up. God has more in store. And so me learning how to push past the times that I wanted to quit, and always on the other side of, hey, I want to give up, was, all right, this is why you had to stick in it. This is why you had to stay. And so I definitely have had those moments, but anytime I have those feelings, I can't do that in isolation. I gotta bring that up. I gotta talk about it. I have to be able to process that with God. I have to be able to process that with trusted people that can see more than I can see. There's lots of times when I'm talking to my friends, it's like, you don't even see it. Like, it's like somehow you're missing it. And, but God has a plan. And so for me to be around people who can see when I don't have clarity is helpful, because they can be like, no, I know the situation is difficult, but that doesn't mean you quit. Because hard does not mean I give up. It's like, all right, I got to push a little bit more. I got to work a little bit harder. I was training for my half marathon this year. I've ran 2 in the past 2 years. And that thing was hard. Like, somebody texted me yesterday. It was like, are you going to run in a marathon? I was like, I don't even want to think about it. Like, but it was difficult. But on the other side of that, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't give up, because I was able to accomplish something that had such a great meaning to me and to my life, that I'm like, I'm so glad that I didn't give up because it was hard. I'm so glad that I didn't give up because it was difficult. And so I don't want to just give up when things are hard. That's not a good enough reason. Unless the Lord releases me from something or releases me from somewhere, it's not my decision. I think when you submit yourself to God, I don't actually make the decision on when and where and what I quit.
Oh my God.
And so if it's up to me and I rule my life, of course I could be like, peace out whenever I want. But because I do not control me, God gives us free will, and I can obviously decide to obey or disobey. But because it's not necessarily me having a say on when my time is up or when I need to move forward from something, and it's God, it's like, all right, if God says I'm here, I got to be obedient to that. And so remaining submitted and knowing that the path that I'm on, that God sees further than me, and I have to consult with him, and he can give me a release. He can give me the response, but he's also going to give me what I need to stay in it. He's like, yeah, I know it's hard, but I'm actually going to give you everything that you need. I'm going to surround you with the right people. I'm going to give you the right resources. I'm going to challenge you to now know that there's a different version of you. Maybe this version of me can't handle it, but the version that God is trying to build me into can handle what can seem difficult and what can seem hard.
Man, so good. You said something, the times that you wanted to quit, it, like, from your accident, you couldn't do it the way you wanted to do it.
Right.
And that, to me, when you said that, that is such a good identifier, because I was thinking, reflecting back, all the times that I've wanted to quit because I couldn't do it the way that I wanted to do it.
And it's not because you want to quit. You just be like, I can't do it. And maybe somebody else can, or maybe somebody else would be better at that. And so sometimes it's not that we want to give up. We just don't feel equipped to fully do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're just, again, closing the conversation with hard doesn't equal bad, you know. And I think in the creative field, I've seen just I think the generation is changing, and I'm trying to understand how it's changing and where it's going, you know, from when I started being a creative. But I think a lot of people just miss out on process and they forfeit process they forfeit the process focused on the progress, but progress.
Because we're seeing more progress. I know exactly what you're trying to say. I feel you. Because people see progress more easily. Like back then, 10 years ago, I didn't know what other people were doing. I couldn't see. When you first probably started getting in the creative world, it was not so tangible to see what this person's doing, who they got a brand deal with, who they started working with. So because people see the final product so readily, that they're like, oh no, I want to get to this final product, but not realizing that every step, Steve Jobs talks about this, that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You only can connect the dots looking back. And so when I look back, I realize, oh, I actually wouldn't be who I was if I didn't go through this, and this. But if we discount the things that we go through and we think that I could just get the final product, then I miss what actually would bring me to a place to get that product. And so I see people at their peak stage so often that I'm like, oh man, I want to get there. It took them something that I have no idea what to get them there.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people are quitting before they just quit too early because it got hard. They didn't anticipate it. Oh, I didn't think it was going to be this way. Oh, I think I was going to feel this way. Right. And a lot of the times is like, you're holding on to the wrong thing, which is what we've talked about. So if you want to undertake something and see a result on it, it's not always going to be an easy, smooth journey. Right. So it's smart to just from the get-go kind of try and have a mindset where you're just holding on to a little bit more than just like the title or the role or the money or whatever it may be, you know, because that stuff it's not gonna hold you.
It won't.
Don't quit, folk.
Don't quit. It's always too soon to quit. For real.
It's always too soon to quit. Thanks for being on the podcast with us, Manu. It's honestly, I could talk to you forever about so many different things. These conversations, they end up being like at least 40 minutes and I can go for an hour and a half and I'm always like, oh, but I could have talked about so many other, you know, so I'm like, oh, I should have him back for it, whatever.
Bring me back. If y'all want me back, write it in the comments.
There you go. But I wanted to end the conversation that I don't know why, and maybe in a few years we'll look back and we'll connect the dots, but I've always felt very connected to you in some way where whatever you need, I'm like, I'll serve Manu however she needs it. And I just see, I just see there's such an influence on your life, and I think we're getting a sneak peek of it, people that are in proximity to you. But I feel like I don't know if this is the right term, but like you're like a transitional leader where like you're able to hold your weight in a crowd of people that are older than you, but also younger. And not everybody has the ability to go back and forth. And like even me, like I'm not that old, but I already feel so detached from the younger generation. I'm like, what's happening? What are you, sturdy? Getting sturdy.
We'll watch videos after this. I'll show you.
Yeah, you have just this. Thank you. You have an ability of going back and forth, and I think that's key to your ministry and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
We're happy to serve you, and we're with you for the long haul.
I love you. Thank you.
Thanks for being
This was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun, right?
It was great.
Come back.
I will. I'm just going to come and hang just at the house. So
love you, Manu.
I love you.
Guys, we'll see you in 2 weeks. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week or weekend, whenever you're watching this. Right. And as always, keep making beautiful things. We'll see ya. Bye.
Thank you for joining Made in House. On your way out, if you would be so kind to follow, subscribe and or like our episode in the relevant social media platforms. Feel free to share this episode with your colleagues. And, as always, keep making beautiful things.